think of especially of those people that you don't like, that you disapprove of, that you feel threatened by. And wouldn't it be wonderful if in some lifetime, maybe not this one, but a future one, you could introduce them to the Dharma and lead them on the path. And let that be a strong motivation to make good use of your precious human life. And then open your eyes and come out of your meditation. So this is a reflection that I find quite valuable. I often do it more slowly, especially after I read the news. And when I think about what's going on in the world and the human-made tragedies that we face, because so much of the suffering in the world is not through natural disasters, but through human-made conflict and disasters. So instead of getting angry or falling into despair, I find reflecting on bodhicitta and especially the people who are behind so much of the turmoil and motivating especially for them. I find that is very helpful to my own mind. And I hope in some way helpful to them as well. So today we're going to be talking about the second volume of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. And this one's called The Foundation of Buddhist Practice. So there's this cover. The picture on this cover was taken from a painting or some depiction of the 16 arhats that I saw at a Dharma center that I visited. And I thought it was quite something. And so we put it on the cover of the book. So let me just introduce you to a little bit of the contents, what volume 2 discusses, and then I'll go into some of the particular topics that may be of interest to you. So just like volume 1 was introductory and talking a lot about that kind of the background knowledge that you need to be able to practice that you don't necessarily get when you walk into a Dharma center or go to teachings in India for the first time. So things about rebirth, setting out the whole Buddhist worldview, talking about, what you need to do to actually practice the path well. So part of that was in volume 1, and it continues here in volume 2. So we start out with the 4 seals and the 2 truths. Okay, nice, simple, introductory topics, huh? Then we go into chapter 2, is about gaining non-deceptive knowledge. Okay, if you think the two truths is difficult or easy, then here going into the how we cognize things, what constitutes a reliable cognizer. How do you make a syllogism? Why is using reasoning in this way so important in our Dharma practice? So there's a whole big chapter about that. And when I taught it here at the Abbey, I was really surprised. People got into it and very much got into it, actually. And they were talking about it, at mealtime. And there were some exercises. They were doing the exercises and the breaks. And they really enjoyed that chapter, although it is quite difficult. The third chapter talks about the basis of the self, so the body and mind. So that has a lot of the low rig material in it. This low rig material was in chapter 2 was more the low rig, the mind and awareness material about cognition and types of cognizers. This one is more about the mental factors in chapter 3. So virtuous and non-virtuous neutral mental factors, and then conceptual and non-conceptual consciousnesses. And I think discriminating between conceptual and non-conceptual consciousnesses is really, really important, because lots of times we confuse what we're thinking and what is appearing to our mind conceptually with what actually happened in the situation. Okay, so some of you may have done some non-violent communication training, and you may know that one step in learning to communicate well with people is to, instead of telling your story, how you saw it and imputing motivations on other people and using all sorts of emotionally loaded words, you try and just describe the bare facts of the situation and how difficult that is to do, because we get so caught up in our interpretations, our projections onto the situation, that often it's difficult for us to take those away and just state the facts with no emotionally loaded words, no mind reading of other people's motivations, none of that, okay? So in non-conceptual consciousnesses, we're just having the direct sense perception with our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, okay? With the conceptual consciousness, then our mental consciousness plays a big part. And it's the one who has thoughts, about an object. And a thought about an object is not the same thing as the object, because our thoughts are embellished with all sorts of different things that we add into it. And that often is the foundation of a lot of our emotional upset and a lot of our disagreements with other people. For example, we may have a conflict with somebody and we say, I knew that person was just trying to get at me. That's why they said that. They were just trying to humiliate me. And we think that's the truth of the situation. It's not. It's our interpretation of what we think the other person is doing based on our imputation of a motivation on them. Did we bother to ask them what their motivation was? Did we bother to ask if they intended to humiliate us? No, we just assumed we knew. Okay, and so this is the source of a lot of misunderstandings. So discerning conceptual and non-conceptual consciousness is very important. Then there's 2 chapters on spiritual mentors. So the first one is spiritual mentors and becoming a qualified disciple, because we often talk about the qualities of spiritual mentors, but we hardly ever realize that we have to make ourselves into qualified disciples. And some people don't even think about looking for a qualified spiritual mentor. They just assume that anybody who teaches is qualified. Yeah. And that is a wrong conceptual imputation. Yeah. And that's how we get a lot of what one of my friends termed charlatananda. Okay. So we see there's a charlatananda and we impose, oh, but they're a teacher and they have all these groupies surrounding them who rave about their qualities. They must be excellent. I'll follow them too. And without any discriminating wisdom, checking up what their real qualifications are, then we can often get ourselves into a jam. So His Holiness talks quite a bit about that. And then the second chapter on relying on a spiritual mentor talks about how to cultivate trust by seeing their qualities, cultivating respect and appreciation, by seeing their kindness. It talks about what happens when your teacher is having quite unusual behavior, or when your teachers die, or, these kinds of things. So His Holiness really kind of brings out some very practical teachings for situations that we encounter that, aren't often in the classical texts. Then chapter 6 is about how to structure a meditation session. Chapter 7, again, we're coming back to talking about the body, the mind, and rebirth, and the whole interface between, or not the whole interface, one part of the interface between Buddhism and science. Then we get into the essence of a meaningful life, so talking about precious human life, and also our favorite pastime, the 8 worldly concerns. Yeah, are you familiar with the 8 worldly concerns? Yeah. My first year, I would say, or my first Dharma teachings, for quite a while, my teacher just talked a lot about the 8 worldly concerns, again and again and again. And if it wasn't the 8 worldly concerns, it was the suffering of samsara. And, which is kind of difficult to hear when you're a newcomer. But I really see now that I am so grateful for that, because it really got hammered into me, the disadvantages of the 8 worldly concerns. And I've met many people who have not had, their teachers have not emphasized that. And I really see, the advantage of being aware of that and constantly monitoring our mind to see if it's being kidnapped by the 8 worldly concerns. Okay. So the essence of the meaningful life, how the 8 worldly concerns interfere with that. Then a chapter about looking beyond this life. So it talks about death and a little bit about what happens after death. And then there's 3 chapters about karma. Because in the West, as I explained last time, people usually when they start thinking about death, then they want to know about karma, and what will influence what they will become. So they don't naturally go to refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So this is one place where we reordered the topics. Okay, so what I thought, and if we were having a live class, I would be able to ask everybody who's listening together what you prefer to hear, but of course we don't. So I'm going to just talk about a few things, that I think are very helpful. So one, and this is in the context of relating to spiritual mentors. So His Holiness talked about 3 types of Dharma practice and accordingly 3 levels of, or 3 types of spiritual mentors. Okay, so he said Tibetan Buddhism includes 3 types of practice, each with its own emphasis, method of practice, and ethical restraints. Okay, so the fundamental vehicle, the perfection vehicle, and the Vajra vehicle. So fundamental vehicle is what Tibetans usually call Hinayana, but His Holiness, and I agree, has banished that term because it is a very derogative term. And if we're trying to really create harmony amongst different Buddhist traditions, we don't want to use a term that is derogatory and insulting. So also by calling it the fundamental vehicle, we're also realizing that what we practice in Tibetan Buddhism is relying on the foundation of what is taught in the early sutras. Okay, so so in the fundamental vehicle, students learn the 4 truths of Aryas. That's another way of saying the 4 noble truths. Okay, so these practitioners study the 4 noble truths. They seek liberation from cyclic existence. To bring this about, they take refuge in the 3 jewels and they practice the 3 higher trainings. Okay, so I know Rinpoche's students have I think, studied all of this, right? Maybe, maybe not. Yes? Okay. And then in terms of ethical restraints, the fundamental vehicle practitioners avoid the 10 non-virtues. They take the pratimoksha precepts as a lay practitioner or as a monastic follower. So either the 5 lay precepts or monastic precepts. And on that basis, you have a teacher that that corresponds to that, and you relate to that teacher in that way. Okay, so well, actually, let me go through the 3 types of practice, and then we'll get into the corresponding kinds of teachers. Okay, so on that basis of the fundamental vehicle, we go on to practice the perfection vehicle or the Mahayana. Okay, but actually the perfection vehicle is one branch of the Mahayana. There's many, many branches of Mahayana. Okay, and actually the Vajrayana is a branch of Mahayana. So is Zen, so is Pure Land, so is Huayan. So there's many branches to Mahayana. Okay, so in the perfection vehicle, the students learn and meditate on the methods to cultivate bodhicitta, and they seek to generate bodhicitta and become Buddhas for the benefit of all sentient beings. To actualize this, they take the bodhisattva precepts and engage in practicing the 6 perfections, okay, which can be divided into 10 perfections too. Then the Vajra vehicle is a branch of the Mahayana. And so the motivation to practice that is the same, except the Vajrayana practitioners have a more intense form of bodhicitta. They want to attain awakening as quickly as possible to be able to benefit sentient beings. Okay, because they can't endure sentient beings suffering. To accomplish this, so based on the fundamental vehicle, based on the perfection vehicle, then in the Vajra vehicle, they receive empowerments into the practice of a tantric deity, and they engage in deity yoga. And so they all have the Bodhisattva ethical code, and those who have been initiated into Yoga Tantra and highest Yoga Tantra also have the Tantric ethical code. Okay, so here you have 3 types of practice, and there's qualifications that go for each, for a teacher of each of these 3 types of practice. Yeah, and it would be, if people knew this kind of thing when they walk into a Dharma center, I think it would prevent a lot of confusion later on. Okay, so our fundamental vehicle teacher instructs us in the 4 truths, gives us refuge in the refuge ceremony, gives us the 5 lay precepts, gives the monastic precepts. If you're a monastic, this teacher also teaches you the Vinaya, the monastic discipline. And as such, he or she acts as a representative of the Buddha. Okay, so the way we relate to this teacher is because they're teaching us the foundational things of Buddhist practice, they are like a representative of the Buddha coming to prepare us and instruct us. Okay. Then the perfection vehicle speaks of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas emanating in many forms to benefit sentient beings. And so this teacher of the perfection vehicle leads us on the Bodhisattva path. So they're very familiar with how to generate bodhicitta. They're well trained themselves in great love, great compassion, and bodhicitta. And they're the ones who give us the bodhisattva vow, or what we call here the bodhisattva ethical restraints. So seeing that what these people are teaching us is, it's built on fundamental vehicle, but it's much more expansive. Yeah. So we view that person as an emanation of the Buddha or as a high bodhisattva. Okay, so perfection vehicle, they were a representative of the Buddha. Fundamental vehicle, they're a representative of the Buddha. Perfection vehicle, they're an emanation, how we see them. It isn't saying that this is who they are. Okay, it's saying this is how we see them. Yeah, because if they're performing these certain actions and teaching us certain topics, yeah, then we should see them in a form of somebody who's qualified to teach us that. Okay, so are you getting what I'm saying? Yeah, yes, no, yes, okay. So we see them as an emanation of the Buddha or as a high bodhisattva. Okay. So His Holiness says here, the teacher is seen as equal to or like a Buddha in the sense that the karma accumulated in relation to our teacher is similar to that accumulated in relation to the Buddha, in terms of making offerings to them, or if we insult them, the similar kind of negative karma. Okay. Now you'll notice in both of these vehicles, we are not seeing the teacher as the Buddha. First one was as a representative. This one is as an emanation. Okay. Then, when we have trained in the fundamental vehicle and perfection vehicle practices and are sufficiently mature in the Dharma, We may request empowerment into practices of various tantric meditational deities. So students imagine the guru giving the empowerment to be the meditational deity and the environment to be the deity's abode or mandala. When doing tantric practice following empowerment, we imagine ourselves and all sentient beings as Buddhas and the environment as a pure land. In this case, not seeing our tantric master as a Buddha would be strange, because we're trying to have pure view of everybody, sentient beings, our regular environment. So of course that includes seeing our guru as the Buddha, because we're seeing everybody that way. Okay, so His Holiness continues, not only in tantric practice is it essential to regard the tantric master as a Buddha, or no, I'm sorry, only in tantric practice is it essential to regard the tantric master as a Buddha. This view should not be taught to beginners who are not mature in the Dharma, because it is open to misinterpretation and confusion. So if you've been aware of many of the scandals that have arisen in Buddhism in the West, and the pain and confusion of many practitioners, including longtime practitioners, a lot of it comes from this whole thing of them being beginners on the path and being told your teacher is the Buddha and you should see him not only as the Buddha, but he is the Buddha. And that everything he does is perfect and you need to follow every single instruction down to him telling you how to tie your shoelaces. So it's often presented in that kind of way. And this is really, you can see from His Holiness's explanation that this is not really how it should be taught. And that just seeing the Buddha, seeing the Guru as the Buddha is only for mature people, only for people who have entered Vajrayana, who have a foundation in the fundamental vehicle and the perfection vehicle. Okay, so my hope is that many people read in the Buddhist world, read this chapter, because I don't know why, but I'm the person that many people call when they have problems with their teacher. And they say, what do I do? He's the Buddha, but he's doing and I don't want to go to the hell realm. They tell me I'm going to the hell realm if I have one moment of anger towards my teacher, and I don't want to go to the hell room, but I don't know how to understand this behavior. And, so it gets really confused. So it's unnecessary that this happens. If people at the beginning of their practice, learn about these three kinds of teachers and the kind of teacher that you have for each type of practice. So I won't go into the qualities of each of these three teachers. It's in the book, you can refer to that. But I thought I would read the bit that His Holiness said about when our spiritual mentors pass away, because I know that all of you are grieving, even though it's been several years, grieving Rinpoche's passing. And I know for myself that the death of my teachers has been the most painful thing I've experienced. It's much, much worse than my parents or anybody else I know who has died, when my teachers pass away. So here's what His Holiness says. I'll read it to you. Because our spiritual mentors are valuable in our lives and dear to us, when a spiritual mentor passes away, we will probably feel a great loss. When Dromdonpa was dying, he laid his head in the lap of one of his close disciples, the great scholar Potawa. Saddened by the fact that his teacher was leaving, Potawa was crying, and a tear fell on Dromdonpa. Drom looked up and asked, "Why are you crying?" Potawa responded, "Up to now, I have seen you as my guru, so there was always someone I could ask questions and seek counsel and guidance from. But now you are leaving, and I will have no one to clarify points of doubt and guide me on how to practice." So you can see from that, Potawa really had a good relationship with Drom. He knew why he had a spiritual teacher. You know, he wasn't expecting Drom to meet all of his emotional needs or be the father that he never had or give him advice about, his retirement accounts or these things. He was seeing Drom completely as someone who he could relate to on a spiritual way, which is the most important way of relating to any living being, and being sad for that, for the effect that losing his teacher would have on his practice. So Dromdonpa counseled Potawa, "You do not need many gurus. From now on, seek your guru in the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets of scriptures. The sutras, tantras, treatises, and commentaries by the great sages will be your teacher and spiritual guide. Rely on them, because I would give you no advice different from that of the Buddha and the great masters." This advice is important for us to bear in mind. Okay, so if you really think, when your teacher's not there, what has your teacher been teaching you all along? What would they teach you in the future? It's what is written in the great text. They wouldn't teach you anything that's not written in the great text. They wouldn't teach you anything that the Buddha didn't say. Yeah. So if we rely on the text, we will learn what our teacher would have taught us had they remained alive. And if we see the text as our guru, then very often the text is what really inspires you. In fact, if you've been listening recently to some of His Holiness's talks that he gave just last week to a Taiwanese group, he told the story of how Tsongkhapa realized emptiness. And he had a dream of Nagarjuna and some of the, Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, Bhavaveka, and so on. And there was one figure that he thought maybe it was Buddhapalita that put a text on his head in the dream. Okay. The next day, somebody came and gave him Buddhapalita's text. He started reading it. And when he got to one portion, wham, because he had been meditating on emptiness for quite a while, but all of his doubts got clarified about what was the object of negation, and he completely then saw so clearly what was to be negated and what was not to be negated in the emptiness meditation. And that happened while he was reading Buddhapalita's text. Not while one of his teachers was teaching him. Okay, so you can see just by that example that if we see the text and the Buddha's mind and our teacher's mind as all being quite much the same, then you can have that realization from reading the text. Yeah. And then to close this section, His Holiness says, it is beneficial to repeatedly make aspirational prayers to meet qualified Mahayana spiritual mentors in the future and to accumulate merit and wisdom, which are the causes to be cared for by such mentors until we reach full awakening. And I think generating those kind of aspirations is incredibly important, because when I'm sure too, when you look around and you see what your teacher has taught you and how helpful it's been, and then you compare that to some of people you may know or hear about who got involved with charlatananda, then you really see, you appreciate having met your teacher so much. And we know that we can't take that for granted because future lives, we need to make prayers to direct our merits so it will ripen in a certain way. So, we want a perfect human rebirth, or we want to be born in a pure land, but we want to also meet perfect Mahayana and Vajrayana spiritual mentors to guide us, and not just meet them, but to be able to have the merit and accumulations of merit and wisdom so that we can see them as beings who have great qualities. Because you may have seen some people come, like even in front of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they don't see any good qualities. To the Chinese, he's a splitter of the homeland. Yeah, they don't see what he could offer them that would be so beneficial. So we need to make prayers to really be able to recognize our teachers' good qualities and to form a healthy, positive relationship with them. Okay. And I say a healthy relationship so that we really understand what the purpose of having a spiritual mentor is. Yeah. As I said before, it's not to have the father figure that we missed. It's not for them to be our psychotherapist. Because our Dharma teachers, they don't want to hear about our childhood. Yeah. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah. I remember going into my teacher and, I wanted to here's who I am and, my childhood. They completely changed the topic. My childhood, who cares my childhood? What is going on in your mind right now? What are the afflictions in your mind right now? And how are you going to deal with them? Okay. So for us really to be a mature disciple who knows how to relate to our teacher in a good way and how to really take advantage of meeting these incredible masters that we've met. Okay. And we don't, like His Holiness has thousands, millions probably of disciples. He may not know who we are. That doesn't matter. When he's teaching or when any of our teachers are teaching, they may be teaching to a whole group, but we listen and we think they are talking to me. Yeah. And then we take the advice personally. We don't, during a talk on anger, we don't poke our friend and say, listen to what our teacher's saying about anger because you have a temper. We think, are my teachers talking to me and my temper? Okay. And then we can really benefit from the relationship with our teacher. So to really make these kind of aspirational prayers and create the cause for that. Yeah. So I should tell you, I know Geshe Topke is one of your teachers at Jewel Heart. So I don't know if you know, but he's been teaching at Sravasti Abbey. And tomorrow is the last day of the teachings, but everything is being archived. And he taught, starting several years ago, the whole second chapter of Pramnavartaka. And it's incredible. And especially this year, it's been even more incredible than before. And then also starting the end of next week. Yeah, the end of next week, isn't it? Yeah. Then Geshe Yeshi, who is one of Geshe Topke's students, is going to be teaching Gompa Rapsal, Jason Kappa's text. And so he's been teaching that for a couple of years. He's still at the very beginning, but you may want to listen online or refer to the archives after we make them. Yeah. So we share a lot of teachers, and in this time of COVID, when we can't go be with our teachers directly, then Zoom is quite valuable. Okay. Then I thought I'd read a little bit from what His Holiness said about making requests, receiving blessings, and gaining realizations. Okay, because this again is can be confusing to people. Yeah, like we hear about, we do all this, in Lama Chopa Puja, please bless me to realize this, please bless me to realize that. Okay. And what does the term bless mean? Yeah. And if you grew up in a Judeo-Christian environment, bless means something like grace, something where somebody does something to you, You're not quite sure what, but, I got blessed. But but what does the word mean in Buddhism? Okay, I often translate it as inspired, because to me, blessing has too much of a connotation of something coming outside, something coming from outside. And Buddhism is so much about our own inner development and being responsible for our own practice, instead of waiting for somebody to do abracadabra. Here's a long life pill. Now you'll live to be 108. Here's a protection cord. Now dogs won't bite you. We can get kind of superstitious about this kind of thing. Okay, so here's what His Holiness says. The topic of requesting and receiving inspiration from the Buddhas is not easy to understand. So I would like to explain it further. To gain realizations of the path, we need to create the causes, both the principal causes and the cooperative conditions. Okay, then the cooperative conditions support the principal causes. The principal causes to progress on the path are receiving teachings from a qualified teacher, reflecting and meditating on them, and putting them into practice in daily life. Okay, that's the principal cause of, making progress. Creating these main causes is essential. Without our sincere and consistent practice, our mind won't be transformed, even if all the Buddhas came in front of us. Okay, the cooperative conditions that help the principal causes to ripen into the resultant realizations of the path may be external or internal. External cooperative conditions include being in the presence of our spiritual mentor, staying at a holy place, such as a monastery or a temple, living with other sincere Dharma practitioners, and meditating in front of an image of the Buddha. So it's when we have contact with external representations of the Buddha or with other practitioners, then all of that inspires our own practice. So an analogy is helpful to understand how an external condition can help deepen our Dharma understanding. If we know nothing about ecology, We won't understand much by hearing an expert respond to questions about it. But if we already have some background, yet lack clarity on the subject, the words of an expert will dispel our doubts and clarify our understandings. Similarly, we may have some knowledge about a Dharma topic, but don't understand it well. If somebody has meditated deeply on the topic, discusses it, the combination of our knowledge and the words of a compassionate and wise person will give rise to an understanding that we did not have before. Do you find that happening sometimes in teachings? Something that you've been puzzled about that, oh, okay, now I'm getting it. Okay. The basic cause is our own knowledge. The other person's words lift our understanding to another level. But if we didn't have the basic knowledge, them telling us that wouldn't have much of an effect. Okay, so then our daily Dharma studies and practice establish the groundwork so that being in holy sites or in the presence of our spiritual mentors will affect experiences and realizations in our path. We may recite the verses to generate bodhicitta every day, but not feel much when we do. Sound familiar? This is talking about me, okay? Then one day, while repeating, even though we may have admiration for bodhicitta, but then one day, while repeating the same verses in the presence of our spiritual mentor, the words have a totally new effect on our mind, and deep feelings of compassion and altruism blossom in us. Have you had that experience sometimes? You know, being with your teacher and you say the same verse and it's like, I really feel it now. Okay. Similarly, we may study and reflect on emptiness often, but reach a mental roadblock that we cannot seem to get beyond. When we meditate on emptiness under the Bodhi tree in Bodhgaya, that obstacle disappears and our understanding of emptiness becomes clear. The inspiration of our spiritual mentor and the blessings of the sight of the Buddha's awakening are cooperative conditions. The indispensable principal cause is our effort to practice sincerely. Without this, such experiences do not magically happen. Okay. So lots of times people say, you know, I've been practicing so long. I do God and Lagema every single morning. And, you know, nothing really changes in my mind. And, you know, I love Lama Tsongkhapa, but, you know, and you know what I mean? Or you're doing the Lamrim meditations and it's like, oh, precious human life. Yeah, I've meditated on that how many times? I like it, and I'll do it again. I go through the outline, but, you know, it's not doing much for me. Okay. And then, you know, you're in the presence of one of your teachers and they guide you through a meditation. Yeah. Or you do Gadan Lagema with one of your teachers. And then it's different. Yeah. Something's different. Okay. So this whole thing of learning the teachings, reflecting on them, meditating on them, that's the principal thing for us to do. And then internal cooperative conditions include purification and collection of merit, as explained in the 7-limb prayer, as well as requesting our spiritual mentors, Buddhas, meditation deities, and bodhisattvas to bless and inspire our mind. Several factors, such as the qualities of the persons we request and how we make the request, play a role. Okay, so I remember when I was asking His Holiness about this, you know, like, what does it mean to receive a blessing from my teacher, you know, and what makes, you know, what's going on? And how do I, how come one person can give a blessing or, inspire my mind and another person can't? So His Holiness, he was so cute. I'll read you this paragraph because maybe you can imagine him in living technicolor saying this. Okay. Realized beings possess marvelous qualities that enable them to influence others in a positive way. In contrast, ordinary people and worldly gods cannot inspire your mind very much. Okay, so then what he said to me is, if you visualize President Franklin Roosevelt and make a strong request to realize great compassion, what happens? Okay, can you imagine requesting FDR, please may I realize compassion? Or, take any president, for example. Yeah. Okay. Maybe psychologically someone could be helped a little. But aside from that, nothing else occurs because that person you requested for spiritual inspiration is an ordinary being. Okay. Contrariwise, due to their great accumulation of merit and the force of their boundless compassion, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have a certain power or energy that can affect our minds in a positive way. And you'll see, I've witnessed this, many people who are totally new to Buddhism, okay, they'll go to a public talk with His Holiness, and they'll tell me afterwards that as soon as he walked on the stage, they started crying. Yeah. My dad, who is as atheist and as you can get about anything, not a spiritual person, somehow we arranged for him to meet His Holiness when His Holiness was coming out of an elevator, returning to his room. So my father met His Holiness probably for about a whole minute. Okay. One of my friends was there to facilitate it. She took a picture. My dad had tears in his eyes. Completely. I mean, somebody who's not spiritual at all. Something, he got something. Yeah. Okay. So you compare that to being with an ordinary person. And then, you can understand that something, how do we say it in 60s language? The vibes, their vibes can, were special. Okay. People who accept the Mahayana doctrine of the four Buddha bodies have a sense of the abilities the awakened ones possess to guide and inspire us. Even if we see the Buddha as a historical person who lived on this earth, it is clear that he was an extraordinary human being who accumulated great merit and had profound realizations. The depth of the Buddha's compassion and the extent of his skillful means and wisdom are evident in his life story. A person of such magnificent qualities must have abilities to benefit others that the rest of us lack. Yeah. When we first started working on the series, not at the first, kind of in the middle, I asked His Holiness to explain the four establishments of mindfulness according to how it's usually done in the Mahayana, which he did. And he pulled out a text, and the text talked about how the Buddha explained the four establishments of mindfulness when he was alive. And His Holiness commented, I really enjoy reading these texts that were about the Buddha as when he was a human being on this earth, because they give me a very special feeling about what a human being can become. How he was so touched by the stories of how the Buddha did simple things and related to all sorts of people. Yeah. So it gives us some idea, like, if you had an anti-vaxxer, go and meet the Buddha on the road, and the anti-vaxxer starts going off about, don't get the COVID vaccine, Buddha, it's all a bunch of nonsense. COVID is a big hoax. And even if you get sick, take this, this medicine for horse parasites, but don't wear a mask, don't get a vaccine. It's all just rubbish and they're trying to control your mind. So if you can imagine somebody saying that to the Buddha, okay, how's the Buddha going to respond? Yeah. Think, what is the Buddha going to say in response to that person? Is he going to argue? Is he going to say, get out of here? You are totally deluded. Don't you realize you're the one who's keeping the pandemic going by not getting the vaccine and not wearing masks? Get out of here. No, the Buddha's not going to do that. What's the Buddha going to say to this anti-vaxxer? Knowing that this may be the only time in millions of eons that this person has ever even bumped into a Buddha, even if he doesn't recognize the Buddha as a Buddha. So this may be the Buddha's one chance to plant some positive seed in this guy's mind. The seed probably won't ripen this life, but to make that connection so that in a future life he can guide that person. How's the Buddha going to do that? What's he going to say? Yeah. So this is something to really think about, because if we can imagine how the Buddha would treat that person and the kind of feeling the Buddha would have, the great compassion the Buddha would have for that person, then we get some kind of inkling of the direction we want to get our own mind going in. So when we encounter somebody who talks like that, we can plant the seed of the Dharma in their mind stream too. Yeah. So in our daily practice, we request all holy beings in the merit field to come to the place where we meditate. From their side, invitations are unnecessary. You don't need to send out like wedding invitations or anything. These requests are done to benefit us so that we turn our attention to them and feel their presence. But beings who lack spiritual realizations cannot come even if we invite them, unless we send a car to pick them up. Okay, we may sincerely pray for President Roosevelt to come to our meditation place, but he cannot do so. And even if he did, what would he do? If we invite worldly gods and spirits to come, they will not know an invitation has been extended. And even if they know, there is not a lot they can do to help us gain Dharma realizations. Okay. How does someone gain the ability to bless another's mind? On the mundane level, we see that some people have unusual abilities, such as the ability to hypnotize others. This is just an example, okay? He's not saying we all have to go out and learn hypnosis. From the Buddhist viewpoint, this is due to karma they created in previous lives. If some ordinary people have the ability to influence the minds of others in an unusual way, then surely those with great spiritual realizations and great compassion must be able to do so. By means of their awakening activities, Buddhas spontaneously and effortlessly act to benefit all beings according to their level of receptivity. Yeah. So this really inquires some incredible realization, because the Buddhas are able to tune into our disposition, our interests, the kind of karma they have, and we have. And so to know exactly what is appropriate to say to anybody at any particular time. Okay. And that's the Buddha's awakened activities. That's a blessing in itself. Okay. Then how we make the requests is also important. The more focused and clear our visualization of the Buddha is, the more we will feel that we are in his presence. This facilitates our experiencing the Buddha's inspiration and blessing. The Buddha's concept of blessing and inspiration cannot be understood with ordinary direct perception. It depends in part on our conviction in the possibility of awakening, and thus the possibility of developing these spontaneous awakening activities that can spark realizations in receptive beings. So we have to have faith that people like the Buddha exist with the qualities like this. If we have confidence that we can awaken, it is not difficult to know that others have awakened before us and have gained these special abilities. In short, the deeper our refuge is in the three jewels, the more we will make effort to transform our minds, and the greater our receptivity to the Buddha's awakening activities will be. Okay, so the word blessing in Tibetan can be literally translated as transforming into magnificence. So it's a dependent process from the side of the Buddhas. Their extraordinary qualities, are their side of it. From our side, it's being open. Okay. And faith, trust, confidence in the three jewels, this is what helps open our mind. And this is not blind faith. It's faith or trust or confidence that comes from knowing the teachings, understanding them, seeing how, from our own experience, even we practice some small aspect of the Dharma, seeing how the Dharma really works to change us. And when we have some kind of conviction from our own experience or from deeply contemplating the teachings and understanding them deeply, then our mind opens up. And then, it becomes easy we become receptive to the blessings, okay, to the inspiration. Oh, I just looked at the clock and it's 5:30. Maybe just if you have any questions, maybe we can do a couple of questions. There were so many more things I was going to read to you, but I think you'll have to read the book or listen to the teachings I gave at Sravasti Abbey. Any questions now? Nothing?
I do. And more about the three teachers that you described. In most cases, would one teacher be all three? But we begin at one level and kind of progress along the way to see the qualities of the teacher, right? So it would be normally one.
Yeah. Well, it could be one. We can also have many teachers. Sometimes when you ordain, your preceptor is not the person who gives you tantric initiation, but somebody else. Okay. So it could be one person that over time starts out being your fundamental vehicle teacher, then progress, as you progress, then they would progress to being your perfection vehicle teacher, then your Vajrayana vehicle. So it could be one person, but also it could be different people who may serve different, like, for example, in terms of Vinaya, I have a few different Vinaya teachers. In Tantra, I received initiation from several lamas. They're my tantric teachers. Same for on the Bodhisattva path, there's different people. So we can have more than one teacher be any of the three or being all three. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep, great.
Okay.
I love all these different perspectives of seeing, some of the same information, but it's always great to have another fresh perspective.
Yeah. And it really gives you a sense of how we develop. And as we develop, how we relate to the teacher, what kind of teacher we seek, and so on, how that also develops. Yeah.
Yes. There's one in the chat, a question in the chat.
Okay.
Why do so many Buddhist teachers spout off their political views as if that is Dharma?
Okay, well, here I have to say, apparently somebody's talking to about a specific individual. I've been accused personally of talking about politics and Dharma teachings, but I don't see it as talking about politics. I'm not telling people who to vote for or anything. For me, when I talk about what's going on in the country, I am talking about ethical conduct. Okay? And so I will make examples of political figures because sometimes their ethical conduct is exactly the kind of thing. It's such a great example of, for example, the 10 non-virtues. Yeah? If you want an example of the 10 non-virtues, it's sometimes very effective to use the example of somebody that everybody knows about, okay? And so you get that from the news. So sometimes that is political figures. I don't follow movies and movie stars and sports stars very much, so I don't use them as examples so much, yeah? But I'll follow what happens in the country, And so, okay, I'll give you an example. Yeah. And then you can see how some people say, why are you talking about politics? I say, I'm not talking about politics. Okay. When I talk about the precept of not lying, I say usually not just the precept, the 10, the non-virtue of not lying. I'll say usually, not always, but usually we lie because we've done something else that we don't want anybody to know about. So lying is kind of like a double whammy, because first of all, there's something we did that we know it wasn't so good, and we don't want other people to know because they'll think bad of us. And so to do that, we cover it up and we lie and we tell the opposite. I'll say, if you want a good example of that, think of Bill Clinton, and Monica Lewinsky. It's a perfect example. Okay. And people say, why, I voted for Clinton. Okay, I'll make that. But, why are you talking about him? When I talk about a harsh speech, I'll often use, Donnie as an example. His tweets are like the perfect example of harsh speech, aren't they? Yeah. I call him Donnie for short to give some kind of feeling of, knowing him. But I'm not trying to talk about politics. I'm talking about ethical conduct, and they're just sometimes excellent examples of it. But I don't know who the person who asked the question is actually thinking about. So, or what kind of example they're thinking about. So I can't answer that in particular.
I'll see if she'll unmute and ask. Maybe not. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Anybody, the person who asked the question, want to say anything more about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
The problem as I see it,
I can't see you. Who's asking the question?
regardless of anyone's opinion about vaccinations, I don't see that it does any good to take sides and call half. There are so many people who are against the vaccinations, and there are even more people who are not necessarily against them, but they are against being forced to take them.
Mm-hmm.
And for many, many reasons, they have only been authorized for emergency use. And yet people go around thinking that they are completely authorized, and it's just
Okay. Actually,
I
go on.
I don't like it when I hear a Dharma teaching in which someone talks about so-called anti-vaxxers as if they are all crazy people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure if the Buddha met an anti-vaxxer, he wouldn't treat him as a crazy person. Yeah. I don't think so. So I think, the Buddha would, might have a discussion with him about it, might tell the person that actually the Pfizer vaccine has been officially, it's not just for emergency use, it's approved by the FDA now. He might tell him that, or he might just say, just think about it, make your own decision, but whatever decision you make, be responsible for it. And, think about your loved ones, think about how your decisions influence others. He might say something like that. Or he might say, are you thirsty? Do you want a cup of tea? And then just sit and talk in a friendly way to establish some kind of connection. Okay. But the Buddha would know exactly how to approach that kind of situation. Yeah. Okay.